Hi students, welcome to Bosco Campus Vision. I am Darshana, Assistant Professor, Postgraduate Department of English, Don Bosco College, Kottayam. Hope all of you heard my previous session. I think all of you are very familiar with our paper, Reading Fiction. Let us begin our portions from the first module itself. In the first module, we are going to study some important terms that are associated with the literary genre fiction. Before entering into the topics, you should understand some basic ideas about different types of writing. Basically, all writing is classified into two. One is fiction and the other one is non-fiction. And this classification is based on whether the work is factual or rooted in imagination. So we can say that fiction refers to works that depend on human creativity more than mere facts. In the previous class I already told you fiction is a deliberately created one. That means it is purely imaginative in nature when we compare with the history. History means it is purely depend on facts, that is expression of what has happened. But here fiction, it is purely based on human creativity or imagination. So the word fiction usually denotes writings in prose. And this doesn't mean non-fiction cannot be creative. Non-fiction may be creative. For example, journalistic writing, travel narratives, etc. And the non-fiction novel is an example. So they can be imaginative in the use of language, imagery and so on. And at the same time, there can be novels and stories based on real life incidents. That means all fictional works are not purely imaginative in nature. There are some novels and stories that depict realistic incidents or realistic portrayal of life incidents. Thus, the distinction between fiction and non-fiction is basically one for convenience. This distinction is only a basic one. It is just for our convenience to divide or categorize the different writings. It is said that majority of reading public across the world would claim they are intense readers of fiction. And the term fiction means they might read novels, short stories, blogs, travel writing and so on. Then what exactly does this word, that is fiction, signify? So in the last class I already told you what is the exact meaning of this word. That is, this word comes from two Latin words. One is fictio, which means the act of making or fashioning or molding. So fiction refers to a narrative in prose and which relies on or which depends more on imagination and creativity rather than facts. So fiction refers to a narrative in prose which depends more on imagination and creativity rather than facts. And now, that is at present, this particular word is used as a synonym of novel. And this novel is just one subcategory of fiction. And works of fiction can be based on real life incidents, but facts can be transformed through imagination. That means some realistic novels, that is a depiction of real life incidents. It is realistic portrayal of incidents that has happened in that particular person or even in the society. And sometimes these facts can be transformed or expressed through imagination. So recent literary movements do not give much importance to fact-fiction dichotomy. For example, Daniel Defoe's Moll Flanders. Daniel Defoe, that is 18th century writer, he presented his story of Moll Flanders as a true story, that is a depiction of real incidents, and belonged to the category fiction. Then next is prose fiction. What do you mean by the term prose? How it is different from poem or poetry? Yes, language not organized into a metrical pattern as in poetry can be termed prose. In the first semester itself, you were introduced to the different kinds of poems. For example, elegy, sonnet, lyric, epic, etc. Poetry means it is a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions, plus what it has a metrical pattern and it has a proper rhyme scheme. Here prose, in the case of prose, it has no such a metrical pattern like a poem. Language not organized into a metrical pattern as like a poem or a poetry can be termed as prose. And prose is the usual medium of fiction, and contemporary prose fiction includes novels, short stories, fables, etc. And most poems and plays are also fictional in nature. For example, handbooks of morals and manners in story form were the earliest specimens of prose fiction. They were considered as the earliest specimens of prose fiction, these handbooks of morals and manners in story form. So, and John Lilly's Euphues and his Anatomy of Wit is considered to be one of the first in this form, that is the first prose fictions, that is John Lilly's Euphues and his Anatomy of Wit. And one point is important, that is prose at that time, that is John Lilly means it is a 16th century writer. So prose at that time was very different from what we know today. In the case of expression, language, etc., everything is different when we compared with the fictional forms at present. Next we are going to discuss about types of fiction. Fiction in prose includes novels, short stories, romances, novellas, fables and such other narratives. First of all, we are going to discuss about fable. And this fable was one of the earliest and simplest forms of fiction that evolved. These are short narratives in prose or verse which convey a moral lesson. That is important. It is a short narrative in prose form or verse form which conveys a moral lesson. I think all of you are familiar with the Panchandra stories. We get a moral message from each story. Am I right? Like Panchandra stories, here fables also convey such moral messages to the readers. But the form is either prose or verse. And it is believed that Aesop, a Greek slave who lived during the early 6th century BC, was the earliest practitioner of this particular form, that is fable. And Aesop introduced the beast fable. What is the peculiarity of this beast fable? That means in beast fable he used animals as major characters to convey moral messages. A Roman writer, Phaedrus, was also an exponent of the same form, that is fable. An Indian collection of the form is Bidpai from 300 BC. Fables used to conclude with a moral, usually given as epigrams. Epigrams means a short poem, that is a poem with 4 or 5 or 6 lines. It is attached at the end of each fable. So fables concluded with the epigrams. That means conveying moral messages through these epigrams. And moreover, fables comment upon the ethics of ordinary life and often abound in irony and satire. That means highlighting the values of or ideals of ordinary life, and sometimes it is abound in irony and satire. Then everyday mistakes like falling into one's own trap, folly of underestimating the enemy, complacency, greed, etc. are addressed in fables. That's what I explained here. That is the ethics of it. Fables comment upon the ethics of ordinary life. And in many ways, we can say that fables are expanded versions of proverbs. What do you mean by this proverbs? Proverbs are wise sayings. So we can equate these fables with the proverbs. Then an example of satiric fable is George Orwell's Animal Farm. That is, in the second module you are going to study this Animal Farm. That is a satiric fable, and moreover it is a beast fable. Then a medieval example of the form was Chaucer's Nun's Priest's Tale from the Canterbury Tales, etc. These fables project human qualities onto inanimate objects and animals, and fables became popular in the 17th and 18th centuries. The French writer Jean de La Fontaine was responsible for this popularity because his verse fables further sophisticated or polished this particular literary form, that is fables, and were very popular. And his verse fables were witty verse adaptations of Greek fables. Some of the important examples in English literature are John Dryden's fables, ancient and modern, and some of Dryden's own poems. Then retellings of stories from Homer, Ovid, Boccaccio, etc. So, fable means a short narrative in prose or verse which convey a moral lesson. That is a simple definition of fable. A short narrative in prose or verse which convey a moral message or lesson to the readers. Hope all of you understand this session. It is the term fable. There is a homework for you. Define the term fable. Hope all of you understand this session. Thank you. Have a nice day. See you again.